Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR. We are presented and brought to you by FanDuel. Appreciate having you here as we are talking through the Big Ten Conference and a lot of transfer portal stuff in this episode. We're going to talk about some Big Ten battles going on in the transfer portal right now. We're going to talk about Indiana, how they are currently the favorite according to some industry, talking heads, people out there, and then also to land a former five-star transfer, really going to test that production over potential stuff that Kirk Cinetti likes to preach there in Indiana. We'll see. And then finally, we're going to end it with a bit of an idea of Oregon. Oregon obviously just lost big to Indiana in that game. They're obviously going to be motivated to try and come back next year. It's a very young team. However, they do have some older players on that team that are projected to go to the draft right now. But what if they don't? And we're going to talk through that situation, the quarterback situation for Oregon, Dylan Raiola, all that good stuff. So stick around with us for this entire episode. Please do like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. If you're listening on podcast, a 5-star rating and review always helps out the podcast, helps more people know about the show, and helps end a lot of that SEC bias, SEC propaganda out there. As you know, we are out here fighting against that all the time. So let's go ahead and get into all of this stuff with the Big Ten transfer portal, because trust me, there is a lot to get to. Now I'm going to kind of be on the fly here a little bit for this episode of the Big Ten Huddle with the transfer portal stuff. So if you would kind of give me some time here, because I'm going to try to give you guys some graphics and stuff like that here next to me for the players that I'm talking about, because you guys have suggested that. And so I do want to try and give that to you. So right now, visits are crucial in the transfer portal, with there being a dead period coming up. It's just Monday to Wednesday next week. It's not a super long dead period, but it is in fact a dead period. And so there are going to be a lot of schools that are trying to get players on campus to visit. You might see some players randomly pop up for a Sunday type of visit, but for right now, this is the information we're working off of, knowing kind of what's happened on Friday, Saturday, stuff like that, and going to get into some of these Big Ten battles and kind of talk about which Big Ten teams are battling against other Big Ten teams. Obviously, there's non-Big Ten teams in these as well, but we're going to typically just reference the Big Ten teams, as that is what we focus on here on the Big Ten Huddle. How many times can I say the Big Ten in a minute? That was a lot of times to be able to say that. So let's start here first with, again, there we go. Got it working there. Sahir West, edge from James Madison, currently battling over him looks to be Ohio State and UCLA. The Texas A&M is also in on this one a little bit. But Sahir West is from James Madison. He was a redshirt freshman this past year. Had a very good season as a redshirt freshman for James Madison, and Bob Chesney from James Madison would obviously like to have him back. West had seven sacks this season, lining up primarily on the edge for James Madison. However, he did move inside a little bit, showing a good amount of versatility, especially with that 6'3", 220 pounds that he has on him there. I do think that Ohio State would probably want to bulk him up a little bit. We'll see what UCLA would like to do with him, but Chesney obviously seemed to be pretty confident with him there, and he did get 7 sacks this season at James Madison. He is the number 169th player in the transfer portal, number 17 defensive lineman there in the transfer portal as well. So West, I think a decision is coming here pretty quick. He's already visited his top 3 in Ohio State, UCLA, and Texas A&M. Feel like it's probably between UCLA and Ohio State, but you also never know. Texas A&M could have made a very lucrative offer that he decides to go with as well. So we'll see what happens in this one, but I think this is a recruitment that both UCLA and Ohio State would obviously really like to have go their way in this one. So next one we're going to look at here is Smith Snowden. He is going to be a senior cornerback out of Utah, the number 45 player in the transfer portal, number 3 cornerback. And right now you kind of have in the Big Ten, Oregon and Michigan going after him. Michigan would obviously be a desirable spot for him, reconnecting with Kyle Whittingham, some of the staff and things like that maybe he knew there from Utah. Oregon is also, closer to home. It's on that side. And Oregon obviously, continuing to try try and, put some more veterans in that secondary for Oregon, as they like to do with the transfer portal. It would be a really good move for them. And then Notre Dame is kind of the other one that's in this as well. Colorado, BYU are in this a little bit too, but it sounds like it's really more of an Oregon, Notre Dame, Michigan type of matchup. Now, Michigan, just lost out on Teo Johnson, so not every single Utah player is going to Michigan, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They got, I believe it was a Henry Daly to go there, so that's good news for them, but it definitely shows that Michigan is not just going to gobble up every single Utah player that goes in the transfer portal. I like Oregon the most in this one right now, but you never know. We'll see what happens. He's visited every school at this point, and he plans to visit Oregon this weekend. We're unsure if that is on Sunday or Saturday, but I would think that after visiting all of his schools, unless he has an additional one that he wants to go to, I do think that he probably is going to have a decision coming soon there for them as well. All right, moving on to the next one. We have, let me pull them up here again. Thank you for the patience. Former Ohio State wide receiver Quincy Porter, who has a number of teams going after him. So his recruitment in the transfer portal is very much so in its infancy. I mean, I guess a team could bring him in and he could commit very quickly, but it sounds like there's a whole lot of teams that are very, very interested in Quincy Porter and want to try and bring them on his squad, on their squad. And so in that situation, you would think Porter would probably want to try to take as many visits as possible and really rack up some of the NIL offers in this as well. Ohio State is not trying to get Quincy Porter back as far as we know. They were trying a little bit with Mylan Graham. However, I think Mylan Graham is probably trending toward Notre Dame. We'll see how that one ends out. But it sounds like the Big Ten teams involved here are UCLA, Washington, Michigan, and Wisconsin. There's a whole litany of other non-Big Ten teams: Alabama, Miami, Virginia Tech, as James Franklin was recruiting him very hard when he was at Penn State, and a lot of these young players do like to kind of follow James Franklin to where he goes. So Porter is a hot commodity. There's info coming out that he will visit and has visited and has visits that are kind of lined up at this point, but people aren't really sure exactly what those are. There was a very early rumor that he was visiting Michigan, put out by another place. However, I don't think Michigan is going to get Quincy Porter here. Porter wants to play and he wants to earn money. And right now, Michigan looks like the favorite to land Jamie French, who is best friends with Andrew Marsh. So not bad news for Michigan, because you could bring Jamie French in instead, but definitely, probably not looking at Michigan. We'll see what happens. Wisconsin does have a lot of connections with Ohio State. You saw Bryce West go there. Aaron Scott, who we're going to talk about in a minute, he is considering Wisconsin as well. So it's not uncommon to see Wisconsin players go to Ohio State and Ohio State players go to Wisconsin. That can sometimes happen with the connection that Luke Fickell has to the University of Ohio State, as that is his alma mater. And then we're also, you can kind of read from what other people are saying and kind of go through some of the stuff as well, that UCLA is being very aggressive here as well. UCLA really wants to give Nico Iamaleava much better weapons this year, and Quincy Porter would definitely fit that bill. If you ask me, sounds like Miami is really, really big into this one. Sounds like Virginia Tech is big in this one. I could see UCLA and Wisconsin making good runs as well, but we'll have to see what happens here. Wisconsin's really stepping up their NIL game this year, the transfer portal, so we'll see what goes on there. So another one in the transfer portal from Ohio State, just mentioned him earlier, Aaron Scott. He's going to be a true junior, number 202 player in the transfer portal, number 19 cornerback there. He has a number of schools going after him, not quite as long as Quincy Porter, but kind of the four that seem to be the most right now are Wisconsin, Oregon, Tennessee, and LSU. So just talking about Wisconsin and Oregon, again, talked about that connection that Luke Fickell has to Ohio State and how that's not unlikely for that kind of stuff to happen, to where Wisconsin gets an Ohio State player and vice versa. Another piece that does get talked about here a little bit is that Aaron Scott, one of his best friends, Bryce West, has committed to Wisconsin, and Bryce West got a pretty lucrative NIL deal to be able to go there to Wisconsin. And so Wisconsin, if they still have some NIL money for a cornerback, they might go after Aaron Scott Jr. as well. He's also possibly going to visit Oregon at some point as well. Doesn't really seem to fit what Oregon wants right now. I would think that Oregon would want more of a veteran cornerback at this point. However, Aaron Scott is a junior, so maybe he fits that bill well enough. He doesn't have as much starting experience. He's been at Ohio State for 2 seasons, and he's played some games, but he's not started there at Ohio State yet. And so you do wonder kind of how that would work out there a little bit as well. All right, moving on to our next one. You have Michael Bennett from Yale, the offensive lineman who is receiving interest from both Oregon and Indiana. Now, he is just coming off a visit from Alabama, so Alabama is in this one as well. But from everything that people are saying and that we're kind of hearing is that both Oregon and Indiana are interested at setting up a visit with Michael Bennett. Now, if I'm Michael Bennett, I don't know why I wouldn't go to either of those two to go for a visit, but, how hard are they pushing? Are other schools maybe being more aggressive? All of this stuff kind of comes into play. Indiana obviously wants to shore up their offensive line stuff. Michael Bennett doesn't even have a rating or a ranking in the transfer portal yet. He entered very early on, but we'll see what they come up with, but he does have some good size. 6'5", 310 pounds would definitely be a mauler on your offensive line there. And Oregon, as we know, loves to get some offensive linemen out of the portal, and Indiana in need of doing that as well. In somebody like, Bennett, who would be a senior, played a lot of football, not necessarily at the FBS level, but has played a lot of football, and maybe Kirk Cinetti sees something in him with his magic scouting eye that he is just so well known for at this point. So we'll see what happens there. Next one is actually a combo of players, Joshua Dye and Josiah Dye. Joshua Dye is a running back out of Southern Utah. He is also not have a transfer portal ranking or rating or anything like that. However, he did very well for himself at the FCS level. I believe he was an FCS All-American there, and then his brother Josiah Dye plays safety. Rutgers and UCLA are the two that kind of seem to be in this one the most, especially from the Big Ten. You could see some other schools possibly pop up, and there are definitely other schools that are interested in him outside of the Big Ten, but those seem to be the two Big Ten ones as well. He just got done visiting Rutgers, and sounds like that visit went well, so maybe the two will go there. And then UCLA, he took a visit on earlier in the week, but since then, UCLA has gotten commitments from Wayne Knight, the former James Madison running back, and Dylan Lee as well. And so that's kind of rounding out their backfield. So you question if they would go with somebody like Joshua Dye. And in this situation, I mean, no disrespect, but teams are really kind of going after this combo of Joshua and Josiah, more so for Joshua. Josiah, not a bad player. He played some at Southern Utah, but definitely not the impact player that people project that Joshua Dye could be. So in this situation, you'd be bringing Josiah Dye on, but probably not to the level as maybe some people would think. Immediate starter caliber type of guy as well. All right. We can go ahead and keep running through this. Defensive tackle. Jasir Whittington from Pitt, defensive tackle. If you kind of got some different Big Ten teams in here as well. As you can see, On3 currently has him as, being predicted to go to Nebraska. So that seems to be what's going to happen here. However, there's possible interest from Illinois and a little bit of speculation. There could be some interest from Indiana as well. So does Jasir Whittington, kind of hold off a little bit? Maybe look and see if one of these two teams bring him in for a visit, or does he just, he liked Nebraska so much, he commits, he goes there. It is what it is. There's other schools like Baylor and Utah, South Carolina's rumored, UConn was rumored a little bit to be interested here as well. But so far, Illinois targeted him. That they've not, they have a huge need for defensive tackles, but it doesn't sound like they've been super aggressive. He's kind of on their radar, but I think you're going to need to move quicker than this if you're going to get Jasir here. And then Indiana might look at him, but they look at him more as a complimentary piece. So if he wants to go someplace where he might get paid more and have a little bit more opportunity to play, not saying he would for sure play, he would, have to compete and everything. Nebraska might be that place for him. Another guy that we have mentioned before on here because he was a shocking exit for Michigan, Jordan Young, the true freshman this season that got some time there to play at Michigan a little bit. Wasn't a big starter or anything like that, but got some playing time. He is the number 140 player in the transfer portal on the On3 industry and the number 15 safety. Jordan Young, he's got interest from multiple Big Ten teams. Also, NC State and Vanderbilt outside of the Big Ten are showing some interest in him. But UCLA, USC, and a return to Michigan are all on the table. UCLA is working to try and get him on campus, trying to get him on a visit as soon as they can, trying to before that Monday dead period starts. But obviously, if that doesn't happen, that would be more in favor of some other teams. And then USC kind of seems to be in the mix here a little bit, but there's not a whole lot of concrete stuff. You just kind of hear their name being talked about a little bit, and almost every single writer is putting their name out there. So not a whole lot to know with USC other than their name just keeps being mentioned. And then I think that the return to Michigan is probably what is going to happen here for Jordan Young. You've seen entries of Brandon Hillman and TJ Metcalf into the portal here lately, and both of those leaving makes it likely, but not necessarily a guarantee that Jordan Young would come back. But I think the bigger thing is that it does sound like Michigan has lost out on Teo Johnson, who is likely going to go to UCLA at this point. And I think that probably is, the two things working together there. UCLA gets Teo Johnson, and then Michigan has Jordan Young there as well. And so, Michigan did bring in some other safeties as well, so it's not a guarantee. Utah safeties as well, so it's not a guarantee by any means that it would work out for them, but that is kind of something you have to pay attention to there. All right, last two, and these ones are going to be a little bit more obscure. Maybe obscure is not the right word. That makes it sound like they're not good or anything. But Deion Crawford, linebacker from Buffalo. There's been some speculation that teams might kind of move him around a little bit. He's 6'1", 235. We'll see what happens with some teams maybe wanting to utilize him in some different ways. He is the number 1,401 player in the transfer portal. Number 140. Oh, that's his high school ranking right there. His portal ranking must not be out. I apologize. Yeah, it looks like they don't have his portal ranking there. So no ranking in the portal yet. I apologize for that. However, he did visit Michigan State this weekend, and there are some thoughts that Penn State and Wisconsin could be after him with some interest, possibly contacting him with a visit sometime soon as well. Deion Crawford had a good season this year at Buffalo and could be a contributor from Michigan State this year or this coming year as well. And then finally, we're going to end it with a guy, D3 player, who actually is not he's not even on 3, so I'm going to use 24/7 here. Liam Danitz, I couldn't find anything with people saying his name, so I apologize. Danitz, he is somebody that is an edge rusher at the D3 level, Hope College. He's an edge rusher there. It sounds like UCLA has some interest here, and Michigan and Rutgers also kind of fit this, and so there's a little bit of interest there, but UCLA is the one who has him on a visit this weekend. But this one does come with a little bit of, kind of behind the scenes stuff as well, because Liam needs a waiver in order to play college football this season. There are projections saying that he will get this waiver, but as we know with the NCAA, you never know what could happen there. He has really good measurables, 6'5", 240 pounds. He's going to be a senior. He's played a lot of ball, and you can't deny this athleticism. If you go look at this tape, this guy has athleticism. This guy has speed, and it's not just speed against, bad competition or anything. You can see it on the film. He did get 15 sacks, and he's been dominating just like he's supposed to. So we'll see what happens here. I think Michigan and Rutgers might get involved if UCLA doesn't close this, but this is definitely something. He's from Michigan as well, West Branch, Michigan there. So we'll see what happens. Very interesting situation. He's coming from, like I said, Hope, the Flying Dutchman. Look like like that name there. But anyway, let me know your thoughts on the transfer portal for the Big Ten and some of these Big Ten battles that are out there. We'd love to get your thoughts, and if you think any of these guys are heading your way for your team. I didn't even realize that advertisement was up. So anyway, 5-star rating, review on podcast, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. We'll be right back. Indiana has received a visit from a former 5-star recruit in CJ Baxter to possibly land at Indiana, with momentum going that way as well. Let's break down some of this stuff with CJ Baxter. I'm going to bring up his PFF here for you to look at from this season. This is 2025. When we get to talking about other seasons, we'll go there. But CJ Baxter, former Texas Longhorns running back, redshirt sophomore this season in 2025. He'll be a redshirt junior. He enters the transfer portal as a redshirt junior next season. 2 years of eligibility remaining. The number 176 player in the transfer portal, number 16 running back in the transfer portal. He had 3 years in Austin, Texas. They're playing in 21 games with 9 starts his freshman year. Let's go ahead and go there. In 2023, His freshman year, he was able to play in all 12 games, had 6 starts, 138 carries, 659 yards, 5 touchdowns, and also caught 24 balls for 256 yards. He got a good amount of awards. Honorable mention, All Big 12. He was All Big 12 Offensive Newcomer of the Year, second team All Freshman on the Athletic, and freshman All American. Honorable mention by the College Football Network. In 2024, unfortunately, he did suffer a season-ending injury in fall camp. If you remember that 2024 season, Texas kind of did a lot that season without a very healthy or with a very unhealthy running back room that season, with a lot of injuries that they had to go through. Built up a lot of kind of sympathy for him, but also made people question if he came back fully healthy and the same player as in 2025. We'll go here and look at that. This season, he started a couple games there toward the beginning, but eventually did not play nearly as much later on. As you can see, the snaps and things like that continue to kind of taper off there, or the snaps and the attempts kind of continue to go off there. He had a breakout freshman season, but this season 9 games, only 2 starts. PFF has here 54 carries for 196 yards, a 3.6 yards per carry. PFF says 193. They're sometimes a little iffy on their stats. I don't know why they do that. It's really annoying that PFF does that, but they're really good with their own like internal stats and stuff. So against Ohio State, he had a 10+ yard run. Against what was it, San Jose State, he had 2 10+ yard runs, but he just never really had it after that. His career total, or he had 12 receptions for 41 yards and 1 touchdown reception as well. His career totals 192 carries for 855 yards and 5 rushing touchdowns, 36 receptions for 197 yards and 1 receiving TD. Good dual threat ability there as a runner and a pass catcher as well. And this kind of player would really put to test the Kirk Cignetti mantra of production over potential, because we did see production from CJ Baxter as a freshman, but then you get the injury, the little bit of a thought process of, is he still his same self? He gets, he has to miss some games in the middle of that year again for Texas, and he comes back, but he's not running the ball super well. It's 3 yards per carry most of those games, and so there is some concern there with that. But he is, like I said, ranked a number 176 in the nation, number 16 running back. He has experience. He's played 2 seasons there at Texas. He's a former 5-star recruit. And so would Kirk Cignetti take him? I personally don't think Indiana and Kirk Cignetti invites anybody on campus unless they're really, really willing to take him. So I think this is a possible take for Indiana. And if I'm CJ Baxter, if they're willing to take me, I am jumping at this opportunity immediately. Indiana is going to be losing a few running backs in their running back room after this season. And so bringing in a guy like CJ Baxter, if you do believe he still has that ability, he still has that 5-star in him, could be really, really important for Indiana this season. Another 2 additional visitors that I want to bring up, just, kind of highlight them a little bit. We're not going to talk on them long, but these guys were visiting this weekend as well. Joe Brunner there from Wisconsin. He's the number 81 player in the transfer portal, number 4 inside offensive lineman. Started all 12 games at Wisconsin this year for the Badgers, a Badger offensive line that honestly just had a ton of injuries and things were awful. And that way he earned honorable mention, All Big Ten award from the media. He was teammates with multiple guys who will play for Indiana next season: Preston Zachman, Riley Nowakowski, Drew guys that played for Indiana. I apologize there. I said that. I said that wrong. As Riley Nowakowski will not be back next season. Drew Evans is a redshirt junior, so he could come back. So he could play with Preston Zachman and Drew Evans there at Indiana next season. But Riley Nowakowski, a redshirt senior, he will be moving on. Unless there's some kind of NCAA waiver or something that I don't know about, he'll be moving on from next year as well. And then the other one is a wide receiver, which I was not anticipating that Indiana would go after a wide receiver, but Shaz Preston from Tulane, the number 258 player in the On3 industry transfer portal rankings, number 45 wide receiver. In 2025, he had 43 receptions, 723 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So really interesting addition possibly here from Indiana. Again, I don't think that, I just don't think that Kirk Cinetti brings anybody in to possibly, to visit Indiana unless he's ready to take him. Now, he was a deep threat kind of guy, so maybe this is, somebody that Kirk Cinetti wants to kind of utilize to take the top off the defense a little bit and have a downfield threat. Like I said, 43 receptions, 723 yards, 4 touchdowns. That comes out to averaging about 17 yards per reception, which is really good, a really good deep threat. And so maybe he utilizes him in that way a little bit more. We'll see. Maybe Tulane just didn't utilize him properly, and Kirk Cinetti has big plans for him. We'll see what happens there. But that's kind of the stuff with Indiana there. So we're going to move on to our final segment here, talking about Oregon and all that they've got going on. So thanks for listening to the Indiana part here. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Could Oregon try to repeat what we saw from Michigan in 2023 and Ohio State in 2024 in the 2026 season? Now, this has been a common thing that teams have tried to do ever since Michigan did it in 2023. Ohio State saw how it worked for Michigan. They tried to replicate it. They did. They won a national championship. And then Penn State this year tried to replicate it, and they ended up firing their coach, what was it, 6 games into the season. So it's not a proven formula that's going to for sure work, but bringing back many of your NFL caliber type of players who might be drafted fairly high and bringing them back to play next season is a strategy that in college football would work very well, obviously with, just talent alone, but also with the way the game is going, with how imperative it is for you to have older proven veterans who can come out and play very well for you. This Oregon team this year, very talented, extremely talented team, but they just had a lot of young players on it. And so the thought process here is if Oregon can bring back some of their more veteran players who still have eligibility remaining to come back next season, it would be huge for them to make that happen. Obviously, some of the players that Oregon might look at with doing that with Mateo Uyunglele, the other edge rusher Tatum there, the tight end Kenyon Sadiq, the safety they just brought in Dylan Thieneman, Dante Moore, and then obviously the man in the middle, Amari Washington there, just an absolute freak in the middle of that defensive line. You bring back 3 of these defensive linemen, and this defensive line that was very good this season could come back and be even I wouldn't say even better, maybe even better. We'll see. They would develop, so hopefully they would be better. But these are kind of the guys that I'm looking the most at to see if they come back next season. Obviously, they can still lose guys. Like, it's not like they're not going to lose anybody or anything, but it is a pretty big ask to bring Dante Moore back. However, Dante Moore really seems like the type of guy who really cares about Oregon. I know he's a transfer in, and that's what everybody's going to say, but really does seem to care a lot about Oregon and wants to see this Oregon program succeed and maybe bring them to the highest top of the mountain, which is win that national championship. He is projected to be a top 5 pick, the number 2 quarterback off the board behind Fernando Mendoza, but that playoff game against Indiana might not have given everybody the most hope in the world. And so there is a possibility that his draft stock could have, been hit by that a little bit, held on the ball to a little bit too much, had some sacks and, just didn't look comfortable back there reading the Indiana defense. No quarterback really has looked comfortable back there this season. But, that's the benefit Fernando Mendoza gets of playing on their team. Nobody scouts him in practice for the NFL draft. They just scout in the games, and he's never facing that defense. So anyway, that's my lame attempt at a joke. Anyway, so if Oregon could somehow bring back Dante Moore next year, that would probably be the first piece of this puzzle to me. I think the other guys are actually, I wouldn't say likely, but more possible. Dante Moore, everything the numbers say wise, almost for sure first round pick. I don't see how he wouldn't be a first round pick, but you never know with the NFL draft and how crazy things can be. So, pretty much a for sure first round pick to be able to come there and do that. That would be huge for them to be able to get if they were able to bring back, like I said, the defensive line, other guys like that. And also this kind of goes into what Oregon is going to do with the quarterback and the transfer portal as well. We've kind of been getting some mystery of what is Oregon going to do. I think early on, many people thought Sam Levitt, the Oregon native, would go back to Oregon and play for them there, but it's not really worked out that way. He came in for a visit, but there's not been a whole lot of smoke around that. And honestly, the most smoke we had there for a while was around Husan Longstreet of USC. There possibly being the guy who comes in for Oregon and maybe going to be the guy. And Zach and I talked about that. Didn't make a whole lot of sense, but you thought, okay, maybe they just really believe in this kid. They recruited him. He was high in his recruitment. Maybe they just really believe in this kid. But now we're getting word from On3 and 24/7 that Dylan Raiola is visiting out there at Oregon. So that could be very interesting to see that kind of thing happen with Dylan Raiola possibly going to Oregon. And some of the thoughts that are out there is that if Dylan Raiola goes to Oregon, he could kind of do what Dylan or what Dante Moore, not Dylan, what Dante Moore did behind Dylan Gabriel, would be to come in, sit for a year, learn the offense, kind of get ingratiated in the entire thing, and then the year after that, that's when you come in and start. Now, that would only be one season for Dylan Raiola unless he redshirts next year, which I think if he's your backup quarterback, you're probably not redshirting him. You probably trust him to be that guy, especially if something happens with somebody getting hurt, God forbid, but that's always a possibility to happen. So if you bring in Dylan Raiola, that could possibly be it. And then Dylan Raiola, he does have enough starting experience that you could bring him in and have him start for Oregon next year as well. Even if Dante Moore did go, you still have a possibility there with a quarterback who has a lot of experience and played a lot of football. He's been starting ever since he was a freshman. This would be his third year starting to come in there and play well for Oregon possibly. He would need to work on a couple of things, but I also wonder how much development was he truly getting there at Nebraska in some ways, and not necessarily against Nebraska to say that they weren't developing him, but maybe just the way that things that were going there, kind of felt like Dylan was getting a lot of what he wanted there at Nebraska. And I think Dan Lanning is the type of guy who's not just going to give Dylan everything he wants. There's a thought process that if Dylan goes to Oregon, that his brother Dayton Raiola would go there as well. Dayton is not regarded as the 5-star type of quarterback that Dylan has been, but he's definitely somebody that could come in and compete for a spot to possibly start there at Oregon at some point. He'd have to bet on himself a little bit, as Oregon does like to bring in a lot of the transfer portal quarterbacks, but you never know. We'll see what happens. And so there's that thought. The other thought is that the guy that looks like the most likely to leave, just for me on the outside looking in, maybe you disagree with me if you're an Oregon fan, let me know in the chat, in the comment section what your thoughts are. But Dylan Thieneman probably looks like the most likely guy to leave out of that group that I told you about. Dante Moore seems like he would be the most likely, but I think Dante Moore really cares, and I don't think that last game ended for him the way he wanted it to end, and I don't know if he got the best draft evaluation coming off of that as well too, so that could impact things. But the guy that seems like he's the most likely to leave, just because he just transferred in this year, he wasn't somebody that didn't care, obviously, but you just didn't hear a ton from him about his heart for the team and everything else. And I'm not saying he didn't have a heart for the team. Please don't hear me saying that. I'm just saying that one of the guys that you kind of could sense that from a little bit is Dylan Thieneman. Just came in, just transferred in this season. He was trying to play for a national championship, trying to improve his draft stock, as that wasn't going to happen for him there at Purdue. And he succeeded in that, and Dylan Thieneman will most likely be drafted, on probably day 2, I would say, maybe day 4 or day 3 if things don't work out for him, but probably day 2 is what I would think there. And so if Dylan Thieneman is just ready for the NFL, he could go. But also too, if he wants to keep improving his draft stock and says, no, I want to be a for sure second round pick or something like that, then maybe he would come back and do that too. Kind of just depends on the draft evaluation grade that they get there as well. So if Dylan Thieneman does leave, that's when you bring in the guy who is actually on a visit right now at Oregon, That is the other stuff that's coming out with Dylan Raiola is Koi Perich. Now the competition right now is pretty much between Koi Perich is pretty much between Texas Tech and Oregon. So I don't think this would be a situation where Oregon would have very much time. Maybe Koi Perich is patient. Maybe he's willing to be patient. I do think that Texas Tech would probably be willing to be patient with him. Because he is just that kind of talent. You don't want to move on from a guy like this, but Koi Perich coming in for Dylan Thieneman would be a good kind of switch up there for them, as Koi Perich is a very good safety, has some ability to play both sides of the ball. Maybe Oregon entices him with saying, hey, we're gonna bring you here, you're gonna play both sides of the ball. Oregon's been looking at some wide receivers in the transfer portal. Maybe you bring in Koi Perich and he's somebody you utilize there on the offense side of the ball. Who knows? We'll see what happens, but it's all very, very interesting at this point. I very much so appreciate you being here to talk about it all with me, as this stuff is getting more and more interesting by the day. So let me there we go through that there. I'm weird there. So that's going to do it for the Big Ten Huddle. Like I said, please do like, subscribe, 5-star rating and review always helps us out. Very much appreciate everybody who is here listening, and would like to get your thoughts, your feedback in the comments as well. Very much appreciate you being here. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.